I'll never forget the moment I opened that crimson envelope with shaking hands, barely able to believe what I was reading. Congratulations, Maya Chen. Welcome to Harvard University, class of 2028. My daughter's acceptance letter, the same. Her high school guidance counselor had looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mrs. Chen, I think you need to manage your expectations. Maya just isn't college material. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." That conversation happened 3 years ago, and it still makes my blood boil. Not because I was angry at Maya, never at Maya, but because of how easily they had written off my brilliant, creative, determined daughter before she'd even had a chance to prove herself. My name is Priya Chen, and I'm a 45-year-old, single mother living in the small town of Millbrook Valley, Oregon. I work 2 jobs, one as a night shift nurse at Riverside Medical Center, and another as a weekend tutor at the local community college. Money has always been tight, but we've made it work. Maya and we've been a team since her father walked. Out when she was 7, she's my whole world, my reason for everything. But here's what I need you to understand about my daughter. Maya has always been different. Not in a way that makes her less, in a way that makes her extraordinary. While other kids were playing video games, Maya was building robots out of old electronics she found at garage sales. While her classmates were scrolling through social media, she was coding websites for local businesses, charging just enough to help with our grocery bill. But different doesn't always translate well in traditional school settings. Maya struggled with standardized tests. She'd finish math problems in ways that were correct, but didn't follow the approved methods her teachers wanted. Her essays were creative and thoughtful, but they didn't fit the rigid 5-paragraph format they demanded. She asked questions that went beyond the curriculum, and some teachers saw that as disruptive rather than curious. By the time Maya reached her junior year at Millbrook Valley High, her GPA was hovering around 2.8. Not terrible, but not scholarship material either. Her SAT scores were average at best. On paper, she looked like exactly what the guidance counselor said, not college material. That's when Mrs. Henderson, the guidance counselor, called me in for what she called a reality check meeting. I can still picture her office, beige walls, covered with motivational posters that felt anything but motivating. She sat behind her desk with Maya's files spread out like evidence in a trial. "Mrs. Chen," she said, adjusting her glasses with that condescending look I'd grown to hate. "I think we need to have an honest conversation about Maya's future. Her grades, her test scores, they're just not competitive for 4-year universities. Have you considered community college? Or maybe a trade school? Some students just aren't cut out for academic excellence." I felt something snap inside me. Not at Maya, but at this woman who was supposed to guide and support students, not crush their dreams before they'd even had a chance to chase them. "With all due respect, Mrs. Henderson," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fire burning in my chest. "You don't know my daughter. You see numbers on a page, but you don't see the girl who taught herself 3 programming languages because she was bored in computer class. You don't see the teenager who built a water filtration system for our neighbor's well because she noticed the water tasted funny. Maya doesn't fit in your little boxes, but that doesn't mean she's not brilliant." Mrs. Henderson gave me that pitying smile that made me want to scream. "I understand you want the best for Maya, but we have to be realistic. The state university has minimum requirements, and Maya just doesn't meet them. I'd hate to see her set up for failure." That night, I went home and cried. Not because I doubted Maya, but because I realized how many people had already decided her future for her. How many doors had been quietly closed before she'd even had a chance to knock. But Maya surprised me, like she always does. The next morning at breakfast, she looked up from her cereal and said, "Mom, I heard what Mrs. Henderson said yesterday. I know you think she's wrong, but what if she's right? What if I'm not smart enough? That's when I knew we had a fight on our hands. Not against Maya's abilities, those were never in question, but against a system that had convinced my brilliant daughter that she wasn't enough. I looked at her across our small kitchen table, this amazing girl with her father's stubborn chin and my determined eyes, and I made a promise that would change both our lives forever. "Maya," I said, reaching across to squeeze her hand, "we're going to prove them all wrong. Not because we have something to prove to them, but because you deserve to see what you're truly capable of. If you want to go to college, if you want to reach for something bigger, then we're going to make it happen. Together." What I didn't know then was just how impossible that journey would seem, how many people would doubt us, how many times we'd want to give up. I didn't know about the late nights, the financial struggles, the moments when even I wondered if we were chasing an impossible dream. But I also didn't know about the miracles that were waiting for us. The mentors who would believe in Maya when no one else would. The opportunities that would open up when we refused to accept other people's limitations. The moment when everything we'd worked for would finally pay off in ways more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. This is the story of how my daughter went from not college material to Harvard University. It's about what happens when you refuse to let other people define your child's potential. And it's about the power of a mother's love and a daughter's determination to move mountains that everyone else said were unmovable. If you've ever been told you're not enough, or if someone you love has been underestimated, this story is for you. Because sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with someone else's doubt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The harsh. Reality hit me like a freight train when I started researching what it would actually take to get Maya into a competitive university. I spent that entire weekend at our local library, surrounded by college guidebooks and printouts from university websites, and every page I turned made my heart sink deeper. Harvard's average admitted student had a GPA of 418. Maya's was 2.8. The average SAT score was 1520. Maya's practice tests were hovering around 1100. These weren't just numbers. They were seemingly insurmountable mountains between my daughter and her dreams. But the numbers were only the beginning of the obstacles we faced. I'll never forget the Monday morning when I decided to schedule a meeting with Maya's teachers to understand exactly where we stood. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I could get them to see what I saw in Maya, they might be willing to help us create a plan. Mr. Davidson, her AP chemistry teacher, was the first person I approached. He was known as one of the tougher teachers at Millbrook Valley High, but I'd heard he genuinely cared about his students' success. "Mrs. Chen," he said when I caught him during his prep period, "I appreciate you coming in, but I have to be honest with you. Maya is creative. I'll give her that. But creativity doesn't always translate to academic success. She approaches problems in unconventional ways, which sometimes works. But college admissions officers want to see consistency and proven academic excellence." He pulled out Maya's recent test scores, spreading them across his desk like a medical examiner presenting evidence. "Look at this," he continued, pointing to her latest chemistry exam. "She got the right answer on 3 of these problems, but her methods were so unorthodox that I had to mark them wrong. Colleges want students who can follow established protocols." I stared at those papers, feeling the walls closing in. But she got the right answers. Doesn't that show she understands the concepts? Mr. Davidson sighed, and I could see he genuinely felt bad about what he was telling me. "Understanding isn't enough anymore, Mrs. Chen. With the competition these days, students need perfect grades, perfect test scores, perfect everything. Maya is a good kid, but good isn't enough for the Ivy League." The meeting with her English teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, went similarly. Maya's essays were interesting but unfocused. Her participation was enthusiastic, but sometimes off-topic. Every compliment came with a qualifier that felt like a door slamming shut. But it was the conversation with the school's college advisor, Mr. Peterson, that nearly broke my resolve entirely. I'd scheduled a meeting with him specifically to ask about scholarship opportunities and strategies for improving Maya's profile. Mr. Peterson had been at Millbrook Valley High for 15 years and prided himself on his college placement success rate. "Mrs. Chen," he said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd had this conversation hundreds of times, "I'm going to give you some advice that might be hard to hear, but it's important. You're setting Maya up for disappointment." He opened a thick binder filled with statistics and college placement data. "In the past 5 years, we've had exactly 2 students get into top-tier universities. Both had perfect GPAs, multiple AP classes, and extensive extracurricular leadership. Maya doesn't fit that profile." I felt my chest tighten. "But what about students who are late bloomers? What about kids who don't fit the traditional mold?" Mr. Peterson shook his head slowly. "Those are nice stories you see in movies, Mrs. Chen, but the reality is much harsher. College admissions has become a science. There are algorithms, data points, metrics that these schools use to filter through tens of thousands of applications. Maya's numbers simply don't compute." He pulled out a sheet of paper and started writing down figures. "Harvard receives over 50,000 applications every year and accepts less than 4%. Even if Maya could somehow bring her GPA up to a 4.0 by graduation, which is mathematically impossible at this point, she'd still be competing against students who've maintained that GPA while taking courses we don't even offer at our school." The financial reality was even more crushing. He showed me the cost breakdown: tuition, room and board, books, personal expenses. Even with financial aid, we were looking at a family contribution that was more than my annual salary. "And here's the thing most parents don't realize," he continued, his voice taking on an almost parental tone. "Even if by some miracle Maya got accepted, how would you pay for it? Student loans for a degree like that could put her in debt for decades. Is that really fair to her?" I left that meeting feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. For the first time since I'd made that promise to Maya, I started to wonder if everyone else was right. Maybe I was being a naive mother, blinded by love and unable to see the realistic limitations of our situation. That night, I sat at our kitchen table, with a calculator, a stack of bills, and printouts of college costs. Every number I crunched told the same story. This was impossible. We didn't have the money, Maya didn't have the grades, and we didn't have the connections that seemed to matter so much in the college admissions game. The worst part wasn't the disappointment, it was the doubt. For the first time, I started to question whether I was doing the right thing by encouraging Maya to dream so big. What if Mrs. Henderson was right? What if I was setting my daughter up for a devastating failure that would crush her confidence forever? I found myself staring at the community college brochures that Mr. Peterson had helpfully provided. They looked perfectly reasonable, affordable, practical, safe. But then I thought about Maya in her room, probably working on one of her projects, solving problems that her teachers couldn't even understand, creating things that amazed me daily. And I realized that the biggest obstacle we faced wasn't Maya's abilities or even the financial challenges. The biggest obstacle was a system that had already decided she didn't belong, and my own growing fear that maybe they were right. What I didn't know then was that sometimes the most impossible dreams require you to stop playing by everyone else's rules. Sometimes you have to create your own path when all the traditional doors seem locked. But in that moment, sitting in my kitchen with those devastating numbers spread out before me, I felt more alone and overwhelmed than I had since Maya's father left us all those years ago. Let me tell you about the daughter everyone said wasn't college material, because understanding Maya means understanding why this fight became so personal for me. Maya Lucia Chen came into this world on a stormy October night in 2006, 3 weeks early, and with more determination than any newborn had a right to possess. Even as a baby, she was different. While other infants were content to lie in their cribs, Maya would crane her neck, trying to see everything happening around her. She walked at 9 months, not because she was particularly coordinated, but because she was tired of not being able to reach the things that fascinated her. Her father, David, couldn't handle that intensity. He wanted a quiet, predictable family life, and Maya was anything but predictable. When she was 4, she took apart our entire television remote to see how the buttons talked to the TV. When she was 5, she convinced our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to let her help fix her broken sprinkler system, and somehow actually managed to solve the water pressure problem that had been plaguing the poor woman for months. David saw these things as problems to be solved, behaviors to be corrected. I saw them as glimpses of a mind that worked differently than everyone else's. We fought about it constantly. He wanted to put her in structured activities, to channel her energy into normal pursuits. I wanted to see where her curiosity would take her. The final straw came when Maya was 7. She'd been struggling in her 2nd grade math class, not because she couldn't do the work, but because she finished everything in 5 minutes and then got bored. Her teacher, Mrs. Fleming, suggested we have her tested for ADHD. David was all for it, convinced that medication would make Maya more manageable. I'll never forget the conversation we had that night after Maya went to bed. David sat across from me at our dinner table, looking exhausted and frustrated. "Priya, she can't keep disrupting her classes," he said. "The teacher says she finishes her worksheets and then starts asking questions that are way above grade level. Yesterday she asked why we don't use base 12 math instead of base 10. What 7-year-old thinks about things like that?" "A brilliant 7-year-old," I replied. "David, don't you see? She's not disrupting class because she's trying to be difficult. She's bored out of her mind." He shook his head. "She needs to learn to fit in, to follow the rules. The real world doesn't accommodate people who can't follow simple instructions." That's when I knew our marriage was over. Not because of the argument itself, but because I realized David didn't see Maya the way I did. He saw her uniqueness as a flaw to be fixed, while I saw it as a gift to be nurtured. When David left 6 months later, citing irreconcilable differences, Maya asked me why Daddy didn't want to live with us anymore. I told her the truth in terms she could understand. "Sometimes people can't see how special you are, baby. That's their loss, not yours." Being a single mother in Millbrook Valley wasn't easy. It's the kind of small town where everyone knows everyone else's business, and where being different often feels like being wrong. I worked as a day shift nurse at the time, which meant Maya spent her afternoons with various babysitters and neighbors. Most of them were kind, but they didn't know how to handle a kid who asked why clouds were white when water was clear, or who wanted to know if they could build a robot friend. That's when I met Elena Vasquez, a retired engineer who'd moved to Millbrook Valley to be closer to her grandchildren. Elena was in her 70s, sharp as a tack, and completely unfazed by Maya's endless questions. When Maya was 8, I started leaving her with Elena after school, and it changed everything. Elena had worked for NASA in the 1970s, one of the few Latina women in aerospace engineering at the time. She understood what it meant to be brilliant in a world that didn't expect brilliance from you. More importantly, she saw Maya's potential immediately. "This child," Elena told me one evening when I came to pick Maya up, "she has the kind of mind that could change the world, but she's going to need advocates, people who understand that genius doesn't always look the way we expect it to." Under Elena's guidance, Maya flourished in ways that school couldn't accommodate. Elena taught her basic programming concepts using an old computer she had in her garage. She showed Maya how to build simple circuits with spare electronics. Most importantly, she taught Maya that being different wasn't something to be ashamed of, but while Maya's mind was expanding, her academic record was becoming more problematic. The gap between what she was capable of and what school was measuring grew wider every year. In middle school, she tested into the gifted program, but struggled with the rigid structure and emphasis on standardized test performance. Her teachers consistently noted that she was bright but unfocused and capable but not reaching her potential. The financial pressure was constant. I'd switched to night shifts at the hospital to earn slightly more money, which meant I was sleeping during the day while Maya was at school and working while she was sleeping. Our quality time together was limited to her ride to school in the morning and whatever time we could steal on weekends. Maya never complained about our situation, but I could see the toll it was taking. While her classmates were involved in expensive, extracurricular activities, traveling to academic competitions, or taking SAT prep courses that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, Maya was making do with whatever free resources we could find. She taught herself advanced math using Khan Academy videos. She learned chemistry by watching YouTube tutorials and conducting experiments with household items that sometimes worried our neighbors. When other kids were paying hundreds of dollars for coding boot camps, Maya was learning Python by reading documentation online and building websites for local businesses who paid her in cash under the table. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maya was getting a better, more comprehensive education from her unconventional approach than many of her peers were getting from their expensive tutors and structured programs, but none of that showed up on her transcripts. By the time she reached high school, the pattern was firmly established. Maya would ace projects that allowed for creativity and struggle with standardized tests that demanded specific, formulaic responses. She'd engage passionately in classroom discussions about topics that interested her and zone out completely during lessons that seemed pointless to her. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, saw this as evidence of inconsistency and lack of focus. I saw it as evidence of a mind that needed to be engaged differently than the traditional educational system allowed. Elena, now in her 80s but still sharp, became Maya's unofficial mentor. She'd spend hours with Maya, not just teaching her technical concepts, but helping her understand that her way of thinking wasn't wrong. It was just different. Maya, I overheard Elena tell her one afternoon, the world needs people who think the way you do. The people who built the computers you love, who designed the rockets that go to space, who figured out how to make clean water from dirty water. They all thought differently too. The trick is learning how to translate your brilliance into language that other people can understand. But translating brilliance into college admission standards was proving to be an entirely different challenge. As Maya's junior year progressed and the pressure to make college decisions intensified, I found myself caught between my unwavering belief in my daughter's potential and the growing evidence that the system simply wasn't designed for kids like her. What I didn't know then was that Maya had been quietly working on something that would change everything. While I was losing sleep over her GPA and test scores, she was building something that would catch the attention of people who mattered far more than guidance counselors and admissions officers. But that discovery was still months away, and in the meantime, we had to figure out how to navigate a system that seemed determined to prove that Maya wasn't enough. After that devastating meeting with Mr. Peterson, I knew I couldn't rely on the traditional school system to help Maya reach her potential. If we were going to make this impossible dream happen, I was going to have to become Maya's advocate, researcher, and strategist all rolled into one. I started spending every free moment I had diving deep into college admissions research. During my lunch breaks at the hospital, instead of resting, I'd sit in my car with my laptop connected to the hospital's Wi-Fi, reading everything I could find about students who'd overcome similar obstacles. I subscribed to college admissions forums, downloaded guides, and even started following admissions officers on social media to understand what they were really looking for. What I discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. Yes, there were stories of students who'd gotten into top universities despite imperfect GPAs, but every single one of them had something extraordinary that set them apart. Something that made admissions officers willing to overlook traditional metrics. The question that kept me awake at night was, what was Maya's extraordinary something? Decided to start documenting everything. I created a spreadsheet tracking Maya's projects, her self-directed learning, the problems she'd solved, the websites she'd built. When I laid it all out systematically, even I was amazed by what my daughter had accomplished outside the traditional classroom setting. By age 16, Maya had built functional websites for 12 local businesses. She'd created an inventory management system for Peterson's Hardware that saved them thousands of dollars in overstock. She'd designed a scheduling app for Dr. Martinez's veterinary clinic that reduced appointment conflicts by 80%. But none of this showed up on her high school transcript. That's when I had my first breakthrough. I remembered reading about something called a portfolio-based application, a way for students to showcase their abilities through actual work rather than just grades and test scores. Some colleges, particularly those with strong engineering or technology programs, were starting to accept these alternative applications. I scheduled a meeting with Maya's computer science teacher, Mr. Kim, hoping he might be willing to help us document her programming skills in a way that colleges would take seriously. Mr. Kim was younger than most of the other teachers at Millbrook Valley High, maybe in his early 30s, and he'd only been teaching for 3 years. When I explained what I was trying to do, his eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen from any other educator. "Mrs. Chen," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "I've been watching Maya in my classes. And honestly, she's operating at a level that's beyond what I'm teaching. She finishes the assignments I give her in about 10 minutes, and then I catch her working on these incredibly complex projects that I can barely understand myself." He pulled up Maya's portfolio on his computer, and I saw my daughter's work through his eyes for the first time. The websites weren't just functional, they were elegant, sophisticated, better designed than some professional sites I'd seen. "Here's the thing," Mr. Kim continued. "Maya has been teaching herself advanced concepts that aren't covered until junior or senior level computer science courses in college. She's working with APIs, database integration, user authentication, systems. Most of my other students are still struggling with basic HTML. This was exactly what I needed to hear, but Mr. Kim wasn't finished. "But Mrs. Chen, I have to be honest with you. While Maya's technical skills are exceptional, the college admissions process is still going to be challenging. These portfolio applications are relatively new, and most admissions counselors don't know how to evaluate them properly. You're going to need someone who understands both the technical side and the admissions side." He suggested I reach out to Dr. Priya Chen, no relation despite the shared last name, who taught computer science at Pacific Northwest University about 2 hours away. Dr. Chen had been advocating for alternative admissions processes and might be willing to mentor Maya, or at least provide guidance on how to present her work effectively. I called Dr. Chen that same evening, my hands shaking as I dialed her office number. When she answered, I launched into my prepared speech about Maya's situation, trying to sound confident and professional despite feeling completely out of my depth. Dr. Chen listened patiently, asking occasional questions about Maya's specific projects and skills. When I finished, there was a long pause that made my heart sink. I was sure she was about to politely decline to help. Instead, she said, "Mrs. Chen, what you're describing is exactly the kind of student we need more of in computer science. Students who learn because they're passionate, not because they're trying to optimize their GPA. Would Maya be interested in participating in a summer research program I'm running?" The summer program was designed for high school students who showed exceptional promise in technology, regardless of their academic records. It was competitive, but Dr. Chen was willing to evaluate Maya based on her portfolio rather than her grades. There was just one problem. The program was unpaid, lasted 8 weeks, and required Maya to live on campus. The cost of room and board alone was more than I made in 2 months. I explained our financial situation to Dr. Chen, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Once again, it seemed like money was going to be the barrier that kept Maya from accessing opportunities that could change her life. But Dr. Chen surprised me. "Mrs. Chen, we have a few need-based scholarships available. They're not widely advertised because we don't want to discourage families from applying if they think they don't qualify. Let me send you the application materials." That night, I sat down with Maya and explained everything: the summer program, the opportunity, the application process, and the long shot we were taking. Maya listened quietly, her face serious in a way that reminded me she was growing up faster than I sometimes realized. "Mom," she said when I finished, "what if I'm not good enough? What if they see my work and realize I'm just a kid from a small town who learned everything from YouTube videos?" I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. "Maya, I've seen your work. I've watched you solve problems that adults couldn't figure out. The question isn't whether you're good enough. The question is whether they're smart enough to recognize what they have in front of them." The application required Maya to submit 3 of her best projects, along with detailed explanations of her problem-solving process and the technologies she'd used. She also had to complete a technical challenge, building a functional web application that met specific requirements within a 48-hour timeframe. I watched Maya work on that application with an intensity I'd never seen before. She spent weeks refining her project presentations, not just showcasing what she'd built, but explaining her thought process, the obstacles she'd encountered, and how she'd overcome them. The technical challenge came on a Friday afternoon. Maya had from 6 p.m. Friday until 6 p.m. Sunday to build a web application that could manage a library's book checkout system, complete with user authentication, search functionality, and automated overdue notifications. I checked on her periodically, throughout the weekend, bringing her meals and making sure she was taking breaks. But mostly, I watched in amazement as my daughter created something from nothing, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her screen filled with code that looked like a foreign language to me, but made perfect sense to her. She submitted the application 10 minutes before the deadline, and then we waited. The waiting was torture. Every day I checked our mailbox and email, looking for any sign of a response. Maya tried to act like she wasn't nervous, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she jumped every time her phone buzzed. 3 weeks later, Dr. Chen called. "Mrs. Chen," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Maya's application was exceptional. We'd like to offer her a spot in the summer program, with a full scholarship covering room, board, and all program expenses." I started crying right there in the hospital break room, not caring that my colleagues could see me. For the first time since this journey began, someone in a position of authority had looked at Maya and seen what I saw. Extraordinary potential that couldn't be measured by traditional metrics. But as excited as I was about the summer program, I knew this was just the first step. We still had to figure out how to translate this opportunity into college admission success. And I was about to learn that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. The summer program at Pacific Northwest University changed everything, but not in the way I expected. I thought it would be about Maya proving herself to academic authorities. Instead, it became about Maya discovering just how far her abilities could take her when she was finally in an environment that challenged and supported her. The program started in June, right after Maya finished her junior year. I drove her to campus on a Sunday morning, both of us nervous but trying not to show it. The dormitory was filled with high school students from across the Pacific Northwest, kids from Seattle prep schools, children of tech executives, students who'd been coding since elementary school at expensive private academies. Maya looked around at her peers and whispered to me, "Mom, what if I don't belong here?" I squeezed her hand. "You earned this spot just like everyone else. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve to be here." But privately, I had the same fears. These kids looked confident, polished, like they'd been preparing for opportunities like this their entire lives. Maya, with her thrift store clothes and her handmade laptop bag, looked like exactly what she was, a small-town kid who'd taught herself everything she knew. Dr. Chen introduced the cohort that first evening, explaining that they'd be working in teams to develop solutions to real-world problems submitted by local businesses and nonprofit organizations. Maya was assigned to a team tasked with creating a mobile application to help elderly residents in assisted living facilities stay connected with their families. Her teammates were impressive. Jeremy from a prestigious Seattle private school who'd been coding for 8 years, Aisha from Portland who'd already published research papers in high school, and David from Spokane who'd interned at Microsoft the previous summer. When Maya introduced herself as being from Millbrook Valley, Jeremy actually asked, "Where is that?" in a tone that made it clear he'd never heard of anywhere so small. I left. Campus that day worried that I'd set Maya up for a humiliating experience. These kids seemed to operate in a completely different league, and I wondered if I'd pushed my daughter into a situation where she'd finally hit the wall of her limitations. Was wrong. Dr. Chen called me 3 days into the program. "Mrs. Chen, I wanted to update you on how Maya is doing. I have to say, she's remarkable." Maya's team had been struggling with the user interface design for their app. The elderly residents they were designing for had different needs than typical smartphone users, larger buttons, simpler navigation, voice commands for those with limited dexterity. While her teammates were focused on impressive technical features, Maya had spent her first day at the assisted living facility actually talking to the residents, asking them about their frustrations with technology and what would make them feel more comfortable using a mobile app. She came back with insights that completely changed our approach, Dr. Chen explained. But more than that, she figured out how to implement voice recognition technology that the other students didn't even know existed. She's been teaching her teammates concepts they won't encounter until graduate school. Over the next few weeks, I received regular updates that left me both proud and amazed. Maya's team was developing something genuinely innovative, an app that didn't just connect families, but learned from users' behavior to anticipate their needs. If a grandmother typically called her daughter every Sunday at 2 p.m., the app would remind her and make the connection process simpler. If someone had trouble remembering names, the app would display photos and relationship information during calls. The technical complexity was impressive, but what made the app special was Maya's understanding of the human element. While her teammates were focused on showcasing their coding skills, Maya was solving actual problems for actual people. Halfway through the program, something unexpected happened. Dr. Chen received a visit from Dr. Michael Torres, a computer science professor from Stanford who was researching assistive technology for aging populations. He'd heard about the projects being developed in the summer program and wanted to see what the students were working on. When Dr. Torres saw Maya's team's presentation, he immediately recognized the potential of what they'd created. But more importantly, he was impressed by Maya's approach to the problem. "This young woman understands something that many graduate students miss," he told Dr. Chen after the presentation. "Technology isn't about showing off what you can build. It's about solving problems that matter to people who need solutions." Dr. Torres asked to meet with Maya privately. He wanted to understand her thought process, her background, and her plans for college. When Maya explained that she was still trying to figure out how to get into a competitive university despite her grades, Dr. Torres was surprised. "Maya," he said, "grades are just one way to measure learning. What you've demonstrated here is original thinking, problem-solving ability, and technical skills that most incoming college freshmen don't possess. Have you considered applying to schools that value innovation over standardization?" He mentioned several universities known for holistic admissions processes, schools that looked at the whole student rather than just test scores and GPAs. More importantly, he offered to connect Maya with faculty members at these schools who were working on similar research. But the real breakthrough came during the final week of the program. Maya's team was preparing for their final presentation when one of the assisted living facility residents, Mrs. Thompson, asked if she could attend. She'd been working with Maya throughout the program, testing the app and providing feedback. During the presentation, Mrs. Thompson stood up and addressed the audience of faculty, students, and visiting professionals. "I want you to know," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "that this young lady didn't just build us an app. She listened to us. She understood that we're not just old people who don't know how to use technology. We're people who want to stay connected to our families, but need tools that work for us, not against us. She pulled out her phone and demonstrated the app, showing how easily she could now video call her granddaughter in Chicago, how the app reminded her of important family events, and how it had helped her feel less isolated. Maya didn't just solve our technology problem, Mrs. Thompson continued. She solved our loneliness problem. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. But more importantly, Dr. Torres was recording everything, already planning to feature Maya's work in his research and potentially offer her opportunities to continue developing the technology at Stanford. After the presentation, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. Mrs. Chen, Maya has been accepted to present her work at the National Conference on Technology and Aging in September. It's a prestigious conference where graduate students and professionals present research. Maya will be the youngest presenter in the conference's history. This was bigger than just a summer program completion. This was Maya being recognized by actual researchers and professionals as someone whose work mattered. The shy girl who'd been told she wasn't college material was now being invited to present alongside PhD candidates and university professors. But perhaps the most important moment came on the last day of the program. Maya was packing up her things when Jeremy, the private school student who'd initially seemed so dismissive, approached her. "Maya," he said, looking embarrassed, "I owe you an apology. I thought I was the smartest person in this program because I'd been coding the longest. But you taught me that being smart isn't about what you already know. It's about how you think, about problems and how you care about the people you're trying to help." As I drove Maya home from the program, she was quiet for most of the trip. Finally, she spoke up. "Mom, I think I know what I want to do with my life. I want to build technology that helps people, especially people who get overlooked by the tech world. And I think I'm finally ready to apply to the schools that can help me do that." For the first time since this journey began, I felt like we weren't just chasing an impossible dream. We were building towards something real, something that mattered, something that would open doors I'd never even imagined existed. The girl who'd started the summer unsure if she belonged was ending it with confidence, connections, and a clear vision for her future. Now we just had to figure out how to translate this momentum into college admissions success. September arrived with a crisp intensity that matched the pressure I felt building around Maya's senior year. College application deadlines were looming, and despite all the progress we'd made over the summer, we still faced the harsh reality that Maya's GPA and test scores hadn't magically transformed. The National Conference on Technology and Aging was scheduled for the third weekend of September in Boston. Maya had been preparing her presentation for weeks, refining her slides and practicing her delivery until she could explain her assistive technology work with the confidence of someone twice her age. The morning we flew to Boston, I could see the nervous energy radiating from Maya as she clutched her presentation materials. This wasn't just about presenting her work. This was about proving she belonged in rooms filled with researchers and professors who would ultimately decide whether students like her deserved a seat at universities like the ones surrounding us in this historic city. The conference was held at the Boston Convention Center, a massive building that seemed to dwarf the small-town girl who'd spent the past 3 years being told she wasn't college material. Registration alone was intimidating. Hundreds of professionals wearing name badges from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Yale, and other institutions I'd only dreamed Maya might someday attend. Dr. Torres had flown in from Stanford specifically to introduce Maya's presentation. As we waited in the speaker preparation room, he pulled me aside. "Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that Maya's work has already generated significant interest. I've had inquiries from colleagues at several major universities asking about her background and her college plans. Whatever happens with her presentation today, she's already made an impression." Maya's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. in one of the main conference halls. As we walked toward the room, I felt my heart pounding with A mixture of pride and terror. This was it. The moment where Maya would either prove herself on a national stage or discover that her small-town achievements didn't translate to the academic big leagues. The room was packed. I counted at least 200 attendees, including faculty members from universities across the country. Maya walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. Good afternoon. My name is Priya Chen, and I'm a 17-year-old high school student from Millbrook Valley, Oregon. 6 months ago, most people who knew me academically would have told you I wasn't college material. The room went silent. This wasn't how academic presentations typically began. But I'm here today because I believe that intelligence isn't just about test scores or GPAs. It's about seeing problems that need solving and caring enough about people to actually solve them. Maya launched into her presentation with a composure that amazed me. She explained the development process for her assisted living app, but more importantly, she talked about Mrs. Thompson and the other residents who'd helped her understand the real challenges they faced. She demonstrated the app's features, showed usage data, and presented feedback from the residents who'd been using it for the past 3 months. But the moment that changed everything came when Maya deviated from her prepared script. I want to share something personal, she said, looking directly at the audience. The reason I care so much about helping people who feel overlooked by technology is because I know what it feels like to be overlooked by systems that are supposed to help you succeed. She talked about her academic struggles, about guidance counselors who'd tried to manage her expectations, about feeling like her way of thinking didn't fit the molds that schools wanted to put her in. But here's what I learned this summer, Maya continued. The same thinking that made me struggle in traditional academic settings is exactly what helped me create technology that actually works for real people with real problems. Maybe the students who don't fit perfectly into existing systems are exactly the ones who should be designing new systems. The applause when Maya finished was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't polite academic clapping. It was enthusiastic, sustained recognition of something genuinely impressive. During the question and answer session, professors from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford asked detailed technical questions about Maya's development process. More importantly, they asked about her future plans, her research interests, and her goals for continuing this work in college. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences was the first to approach us after the session ended. Maya, she said, what you've presented today demonstrates exactly the kind of innovative thinking we value in our computer science program. Have you considered applying to Harvard? I almost laughed out loud. 6 months ago, Mrs. Henderson had told us to manage our expectations about community college. Now a Harvard professor was encouraging Maya to apply, but Dr. Walsh wasn't finished. I'd like to invite you to visit our campus next month. We have a special admissions pathway for students who demonstrate exceptional innovation and real-world impact, regardless of traditional academic metrics. Your work today suggests you might be exactly the kind of student we're looking for. Dr. Torres, who'd been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. Jennifer, Maya's research aligns perfectly with the assistive technology initiative you're launching next year. Have you considered offering her early admission status? My head was spinning. Early admission? To Harvard? For the daughter everyone said wasn't college material? Dr. Walsh exchanged glances with Dr. Torres, then looked back at Maya. Maya, would you be interested in participating in our Innovation Scholars program? It's designed for students whose achievements extend beyond traditional academic measures. If your application demonstrates the same level of insight and impact as your presentation today, I'd be prepared to advocate for your admission personally. That evening, back in our hotel room, Maya and I sat in stunned silence. The day had exceeded our wildest expectations, but the magnitude of what was happening felt almost too good to be true. Mom, Maya said finally, do you think they really mean it? Or are they just being polite? I looked at my daughter. this remarkable young woman who'd just commanded the attention and respect of some of the most prestigious academics in the country. And I realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being the uncertain girl who worried about not being smart enough. "Maya," I said, "I think they see what I've always seen. You're not just smart, you're innovative. You don't just solve problems, you solve problems that matter. And that's exactly what universities like Harvard need." The next morning, Dr. Walsh called our hotel room personally. "Maya, I've spoken with our admissions committee and we'd like to expedite your application process. If you're seriously interested in Harvard, we can arrange for you to submit a portfolio-based application that focuses on your research and innovation rather than traditional academic metrics." She explained that Maya would still need to meet minimum academic requirements, but her demonstrated abilities and real-world impact would weigh much more heavily than her GPA or test scores. "There's one more thing," Dr. Walsh added. "The Assistive Technology Research Lab I mentioned is actively seeking undergraduate researchers. If you're admitted and choose to attend Harvard, I'd like to offer you a position in my lab starting your freshman year, with full funding for your research." I watched Maya's face transform as Dr. Walsh spoke. The girl who'd spent years doubting whether she was smart enough for college was being offered a research position at Harvard before she'd even been officially admitted. As we flew home to Oregon, Maya stared out the airplane window with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," she said, "I keep thinking about Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Peterson and all the people who said I wasn't college material. Part of me wants to prove them wrong, but mostly I just feel sad for all the other kids they're probably saying the same thing to right now." That's when I knew that Maya hadn't just discovered her potential. She'd discovered her purpose. She wasn't just going to succeed despite the system that had tried to limit her. She was going to change that system so other kids like her wouldn't have to fight so hard to be seen. The impossible was becoming possible, and we were about to learn that sometimes the biggest dreams require the biggest leaps of faith. The weeks following the conference felt like living in an alternate universe. Maya was working on her Harvard application with Dr. Walsh's personal guidance, while simultaneously fielding inquiries from MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. The same daughter who'd been told she wasn't college material was now being courted by the most prestigious universities in the country. But the real revelation came when Maya decided she wanted to return to Millbrook Valley High School to finish her senior year, despite offers from several universities to fast-track her admission and skip her final year of high school entirely. "I need to finish what I started," she told me. "And I think there are things I need to do here before I leave." What Maya had in mind became clear during the first week of October, when she scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Henderson, the guidance counselor who'd delivered that devastating assessment just 1 year earlier. I offered to go with her, but Maya shook her head. "Mom, this is something I need to do myself." Maya later told me every detail of that conversation, and I wish I could have been there to see Mrs. Henderson's face when Maya walked into her office carrying acceptance letters from 3 Ivy League schools and a research position offer from Harvard. "Mrs. Henderson," Maya began, placing the letters on the desk, "I wanted to thank you." The guidance counselor looked confused as she picked up the Harvard letter, her eyes widening as she read. "Thank me?" Mrs. Henderson asked, clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. "You told me I wasn't college material," Maya said calmly. "At first, that devastated me. But then it forced me to ask a really important question. If I'm not college material according to the traditional standards, then maybe those standards aren't measuring the right things." Maya explained how that conversation had motivated her to find alternative ways to demonstrate her abilities, leading to the summer program, the research project, and ultimately the recognition from universities that valued innovation over standardization. "You were right that I didn't fit the traditional mold," Maya continued. "But what you missed is that some of the most important work in the world is done by people who don't fit traditional molds." Mrs. Henderson sat in stunned silence, reading through the acceptance letters and research offers. Maya, I don't know what to say. How did this happen? That's when Maya delivered the message that would change not just Mrs. Henderson's perspective, but the entire approach to college counseling at Millbrook Valley High School. It happened because someone believed in me, Maya said. My mom never stopped believing, even when everyone else did. Dr. Chen at Pacific Northwest University saw potential where others saw deficiency. Dr. Torres and Dr. Walsh looked at my work instead of just my grades. Maya leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Mrs. Henderson, how many other students have you told aren't college material? How many kids are sitting in classes right now believing they're not smart enough because their intelligence doesn't show up on standardized tests? Mrs. Henderson's face went pale. Maya, I was just trying to be realistic, to prevent disappointment. I understand, Maya said, but realistic according to whose definition? A year ago, you thought it was realistic to assume that a 2.8 GPA meant I couldn't succeed at a top university. But that was only realistic if you accepted that grades are the only way to measure intelligence and potential. Maya pulled out her laptop and showed Mrs. Henderson the assistive technology app she'd developed, the presentation from the national conference, and testimonials from the elderly residents whose lives had been improved by her work. This is what I was doing while I was getting C's in chemistry because I couldn't memorize formulas the way Mr. Davidson wanted me to, Maya explained. I was solving real problems for real people. But our system isn't designed to recognize or value that kind of learning. Mrs. Henderson stared at the screen, watching Maya demonstrate technology that was more sophisticated than anything she'd ever seen from a high school student. What do you want me to do? Mrs. Henderson asked quietly. That's when Maya revealed the real reason for the meeting. I want to start a program here for students like me. Students who are brilliant but don't fit traditional academic molds. I want to help them find ways to demonstrate their abilities and connect with opportunities that value innovation over standardization. Maya proposed creating what she called the Alternative Excellence Program, a track for students whose strengths lay outside traditional academic measures. Students could work on real-world projects, build portfolios of their work, and receive mentorship from professionals in their areas of interest. Think about it, Maya said. How many students do we lose because we convince them they're not smart? Enough? How much potential do we waste because we only recognize one type of intelligence? Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, then asked, Would you be willing to present this idea to the school board? 3 weeks later, Maya stood before the Millbrook Valley School Board with a presentation that would revolutionize how the district approached college counseling. She brought Dr. Chen and Dr. Torres via video conference to speak about alternative admissions pathways. She presented data showing that many successful innovators and entrepreneurs had struggled in traditional academic settings. Most powerfully, she brought Mrs. Thompson from the assisted living facility to speak about how Maya's technology had improved her quality of life. This young woman didn't help me because she got good grades, Mrs. Thompson told the school board. She helped me because she listened, because she cared, and because she had the skills to turn caring into action. Those are the qualities we should be nurturing in all our students. The school board approved the Alternative Excellence Program unanimously, with Maya as its first official participant and eventual student mentor. But the most meaningful moment came after the school board meeting, when Mr. Peterson, the college advisor who'd told me I was setting Maya up for failure, approached us in the parking lot. Mrs. Chen, he said, his voice heavy with emotion, I owe you and Maya an apology. I've been in education for 20 years, and I thought I understood what success looked like. Maya has taught me that I was measuring the wrong things. He turned to Maya. You've shown me that my job isn't to manage students' expectations. It's to help them exceed expectations they didn't even know they could have. That evening, as Maya and I sat at our kitchen table reviewing her final Harvard application materials, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Mom, do you realize what happened? We didn't just prove that I was college material. We proved that the whole idea of college material was wrong from the beginning. I reached across and squeezed her hand. Maya, you've done something more important than just getting into Harvard. You've shown people that intelligence comes in many forms and that the students who don't fit traditional molds might be exactly the ones we need most. Maya smiled, but then her expression grew serious. The scary part is thinking about how many kids are out there right now being told they're not smart enough, not good enough, not college material. How many kids give up on their dreams because the adults around them can't see their potential? That's when I realized that Maya's journey had revealed something much bigger than just her individual success. It had exposed a fundamental flaw in how we identify and nurture talent, and Maya was determined to spend her life fixing that system. The girl who'd been written off by her guidance counselor was about to enter Harvard, not just as a student, but as someone who'd already begun changing the world by changing how we think about intelligence, potential, and what it means to be college material. The revelation wasn't just that Maya was capable of academic excellence, it was that excellence itself needed to be redefined. December arrived with a snow-covered quiet that felt different from any winter we'd experienced before. Maya's Harvard acceptance was official. Her scholarship package was generous enough to make attendance financially possible, and the Alternative Excellence program at Millbrook Valley High School was already changing lives for other students who'd been written off by traditional measures. But the real transformation had happened within our family and our community. The ripple effects of Maya's journey extended far beyond college admissions. They had fundamentally changed how people in our small town thought about intelligence, potential, and the value of being different. The first major change came when Dr. Martinez, the superintendent of our school district, called me personally to discuss expanding the Alternative Excellence program to other schools in the region. Maya's success had caught the attention of education officials across Oregon, and they wanted to understand how a small-town school had developed such an innovative approach to college preparation. Mrs. Chen, Dr. Martinez said during our meeting, Maya's story has made us realize that we've been failing students for years. Not just students like Maya, but all students whose strengths don't align with traditional academic measures. We want to create a statewide pilot program based on what Maya developed here. The pilot program would allow students across Oregon to pursue portfolio-based college applications, connect with mentors in their areas of interest, and receive support for real-world projects that demonstrated their abilities. Maya would serve as the program's student ambassador, helping to train counselors and teachers on how to identify and nurture non-traditional forms of excellence. Meanwhile, Maya was spending her remaining months of high school mentoring 3 younger students who'd been identified as candidates for the Alternative Excellence program. There was Marcus, a sophomore who struggled with reading comprehension but could design and build complex mechanical devices that solved practical problems. Sarah, a junior whose anxiety made traditional testing impossible, but who created digital art that had already attracted attention from galleries in Portland. And Jennifer, a freshman who barely spoke in classes but wrote poetry that made her teachers cry and had already been published in literary magazines. Watching Maya work with these students showed me that her transformation was complete. The uncertain girl who'd once worried about not being smart enough had become a confident young woman who could see potential in others that they couldn't yet see in themselves. Marcus, I overheard Maya telling him one afternoon as they worked on his college portfolio. You know that irrigation system you designed for your family's farm? That's not just a school project. That's engineering innovation. You solved a problem that saved your family thousands of dollars and improved their crop yields. That's exactly what colleges want to see. Marcus looked skeptical. But my grades are terrible. I failed 3 classes last year. Maya smiled. I got C's in chemistry while I was building technology that impressed Harvard professors. Grades measure how well you perform on tests, not how well you solve real problems. We just need to help colleges see what you're really capable of. The transformation in these students was remarkable. Marcus went from believing he wasn't smart enough for community college to being recruited by Oregon State University's engineering program after they saw his portfolio of practical inventions. Sarah received early admission to the Pacific Northwest College of Art with a full scholarship. Jennifer was invited to join a summer writing program at Reed College, despite being only a freshman. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation happened with Elena Vasquez, Maya's original mentor. At 82, Elena had decided to write a book about her experiences as one of the few Latina women in NASA's early space program. Maya was helping her not just with the technical aspects of digital publishing, but with reaching out to other women who'd faced similar challenges in STEM fields. Maya, Elena told me one evening when I picked Maya up from her house, I've watched this child grow from a curious little girl into someone who's going to change the world. But more than that, she's taught me that my own story still matters, that there are still contributions I can make. Elena's book became a community project, with Maya organizing interviews with other retired female engineers and scientists, creating a digital archive of their stories, and developing a website that would serve as a resource for young women interested in STEM careers. The project caught the attention of the Smithsonian Institution, which offered to include Elena's story in their upcoming exhibit on women in aerospace. The financial transformation was perhaps the most practical but equally important. Maya's scholarship to Harvard, combined with her paid research position in Dr. Walsh's lab, meant that we could finally stop worrying about money for the first time in years. But more significantly, Maya had started earning substantial income from her freelance technology work. Companies that had learned about her assistive technology research were hiring her to consult on accessibility projects. "Mom," Maya said one evening as we reviewed the contract for her latest consulting project, "I think I can pay for my own college expenses and still have money left over to help fund the Alternative Excellence program." The program needed resources to provide technology access, transportation to conferences, and stipends for mentor relationships. Maya wanted to ensure that financial barriers wouldn't prevent other students from accessing the opportunities that had changed her life. In January, just before Maya was scheduled to leave for Harvard, our local newspaper, the Millbrook Valley Tribune, featured Maya on their front page with the headline, "Local Student Redefines Academic Excellence." The article detailed not just Maya's college success, but her work in transforming the educational approach for other students. The article caught the attention of education reformers across the country. Maya began receiving invitations to speak at conferences, to consult with school districts, and to participate in policy discussions about college admissions reform. Harvard agreed to allow her to defer enrollment for one semester so she could fulfill speaking engagements and help establish the Alternative Excellence program in additional school districts. But the most profound transformation was in Maya herself. The girl who'd once asked me, "What if I'm not smart enough?" was now confidently fielding questions from reporters, policymakers, and educators about how to identify and nurture diverse forms of intelligence. During one particularly moving interview, with the Education podcast, Maya was asked what advice she'd give to students who were being told they weren't college material. "I'd tell them that being different isn't a limitation. It's a superpower," Maya said. The students who don't fit perfectly into existing systems might be exactly the ones we need to design better systems. Don't let anyone convince you that there's only one way to be intelligent or successful. The interviewer then asked what Maya had learned from her journey. "I learned that my mom was right when she told me that I was enough, just as I was," Maya replied. "But I also learned that being enough isn't just about individual success. It's about using your gifts to make sure other people know they're enough, too." As I listened to my daughter speak with such wisdom and purpose, I realized that our journey had accomplished something far greater than getting Maya into Harvard. We'd proven that love, determination, and refusal to accept other people's limitations could not only change one life, they could change entire systems. Maya was going to Harvard not just as a student who'd overcome obstacles, but as someone who'd already begun the work of removing those obstacles for others. The transformation was complete, but in many ways, the real work was just beginning. As I sit here writing this story, Maya is now in her second semester at Harvard, leading a research team that's developing accessibility technology for students with learning differences. The girl who was told she wasn't college material is not just succeeding at one of the world's most prestigious universities. She's pioneering research that will help other students who don't fit traditional academic molds. But this story isn't really about Harvard. It's not even really about Maya, though I'm incredibly proud of everything she's achieved. This story is about something much more important: the power of refusing to accept other people's definitions of your child's potential. Every week, I receive emails from parents who've read about Maya's journey. They tell me about their own children, kids, who are brilliant but struggle with standardized tests, teenagers who think in pictures instead of words, students whose creativity gets labeled as distraction, and whose curiosity gets dismissed as lack of focus. Last month, I received a letter from a mother in rural Montana whose son builds robots from farm equipment scraps, but is failing his engineering classes because he can't memorize formulas. Another parent wrote about her daughter who speaks 3 languages fluently but struggles with reading comprehension tests. A father shared the story of his son who composed music that moves people to tears, but was told he wasn't intellectually rigorous enough for a music conservatory. Every single one of these stories breaks my heart because I see Maya in each of these children. I see brilliant minds being dismissed because their intelligence doesn't fit neat categories. I see potential being wasted because we've created systems that only recognize one narrow definition of success. But here's what I want every parent reading this to understand. Your child's mind is not broken if it works differently. Your student is not less intelligent if they can't perform well on standardized tests. Your teenager is not lazy if they struggle with traditional classroom structures but can spend hours mastering skills that fascinate them. The education system is not designed to recognize every form of intelligence, but that doesn't mean those forms of intelligence are less valuable. Some of our greatest innovators, artists, entrepreneurs, and problem solvers were students who didn't fit traditional academic molds. Maya's story has taught me that there are 3 critical things parents must do when the world tells them their child isn't enough. First, never stop believing in your child's potential, even when everyone else has given up. There were moments when I doubted myself, when the evidence seemed overwhelming that maybe everyone else was right. But deep down, I knew Maya was extraordinary, and I refused to let other people's limitations become her limitations. Your unwavering belief in your child's abilities might be the only thing standing between them and a lifetime of accepting less than they deserve. Second, help your child find their own path when traditional paths don't work. Maya succeeded not because she eventually figured out how to excel in traditional academic settings, but because we found alternative ways for her to demonstrate her abilities. Look for mentors who see your child's potential. Seek out programs that value innovation over standardization. Create opportunities for your child to showcase their unique strengths, even if those opportunities don't exist yet. Third, teach your child that being different is a strength, not a weakness. The world needs people who think differently, who see problems from new angles, who refuse to accept that things have to be done the way they've always been done. Some of the most important work in our world is done by people who were told they didn't fit, who were underestimated, who proved everyone wrong by changing the rules of the game entirely. Maya's Harvard acceptance was meaningful, but what matters more is what she's doing with that opportunity. She's using her platform to advocate for other students who are being overlooked. She's conducting research that will help people who've been marginalized by traditional systems. She's proving that success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about using your success to create opportunities for others. The Alternative Excellence program that started at Millbrook Valley High School is now being implemented in over 50 school districts across 12 states. Hundreds of students who might have been written off are now thriving in college programs that recognize their unique forms of intelligence. Companies are starting to recruit based on demonstrated innovation rather than just GPA and test scores. But the real victory isn't in the programs or the policy changes, as important as those are. The real victory is in every parent who refuses to accept limiting labels for their child. It's in every student who learns that their worth isn't determined by how well they perform on tests designed for minds that work differently than theirs. Think about Mrs. Henderson, Maya's former guidance counselor, who now travels to education conferences sharing Maya's story and advocating for alternative assessment methods. I think about Mr. Peterson, who completely transformed his college counseling approach and has helped dozens of non-traditional students find paths to higher education. Even the people who initially doubted Maya became advocates for change once they saw what was possible. That's the power of refusing to give up on a child who doesn't fit traditional molds. It doesn't just change that child's life. It changes entire systems, entire communities, entire ways of thinking about intelligence and potential. If you're a parent reading this story and thinking about your own child who's been told they're not smart enough, not focused enough, not college material, I want you to know something. Those people are wrong. Not because every child is destined for Harvard. That's not the point. They're wrong because intelligence, creativity, and potential come in infinite forms, and just because your child's gifts don't fit standard measurements doesn't mean those gifts are any less valuable. Maya's story could have ended with her accepting other people's limitations. She could have settled for community college, convinced herself that she wasn't smart enough for bigger dreams, spent her life wondering what might have been possible if someone had believed in her. Instead, her story became proof that when you refuse to accept other people's definitions of your child's potential, you don't just change your child's life, you change the world's understanding of what potential looks like. So if this story resonated with you, if you recognized your own child in Maya's journey, if you've ever been told to lower your expectations or manage your hopes, I want you to do something. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me about the brilliant, non-traditional thinker in your life who deserves to have their potential recognized. And most importantly, never stop fighting for the child who doesn't fit the mold, because those children might just be the ones who reshape the world. The question isn't whether your child is college material. The question is whether colleges are smart enough to recognize the material your child is made of. And if they're not, then maybe it's time to change how we define intelligence, success, and human potential entirely. Because every child deserves to have someone believe in their unique form of brilliance. Every student deserves to be seen for their gifts, not just their deficits. And every parent deserves to know that their fierce advocacy for their child's potential can move mountains that everyone else insists are unmovable. Your child's story of proving everyone wrong is waiting to be written. Don't let anyone convince you it's not worth telling. 3 years have passed since Maya first walked through Harvard's gates, and I wanted to give you an update on where this incredible journey has led, because sometimes the most important part of a story is what happens after the happy ending. Maya is now a junior at Harvard, double majoring in computer science and education policy. But more importantly, she's become exactly the person I always knew she could be. Someone who uses her gifts not just for personal success, but to create pathways for others who've been overlooked. Last semester, Maya published her first research paper in the Journal of Assistive Technology, co-authored with Dr. Walsh. The technology she originally developed for elderly residents has evolved into a comprehensive platform that's now being used in assisted living facilities across New England. But Maya didn't stop there. She's adapted the same principles to create learning tools for students with dyslexia, ADHD, and autism spectrum disorders. The research caught the attention of major tech companies, and Maya has already received multiple job offers with starting salaries that seemed impossible just a few years ago. But when Google offered her a summer internship that would have paid more than I make in a year, Maya turned it down to spend her summer training teachers in rural communities on how to identify and nurture non-traditional learners. "Mom," she told me when I asked her about the decision, "I didn't fight this hard to get here just to forget where I came from. There are kids in classrooms right now being told they're not smart enough, and I know how to help them. That matters more than any paycheck." The Alternative Excellence program that started in our small Oregon town has now been implemented in over 200 school districts across 20 states. Maya serves on the advisory board and has helped train more than 500 counselors and teachers on recognizing diverse forms of intelligence. The program has helped thousands of students find pathways to higher education who would have been written off under traditional systems. But perhaps the most meaningful development is what happened to the 3 students Maya mentored during her senior year of high school. Marcus, the young man who designed irrigation systems but struggled with traditional academics, is now a sophomore at Oregon State University studying agricultural engineering. His freshman year project, a water conservation system for small farms, won the university's Innovation Award and is being piloted by the Department of Agriculture. Last month, he called Maya to tell her he'd been accepted into a prestigious summer research program at UC Davis. Sarah, the artist whose anxiety made traditional testing impossible, graduated from Pacific Northwest College of Art last spring with highest honors. Her senior exhibition, which explored themes of neurodiversity and belonging, was featured in Portland's Museum of Contemporary Art. She's now pursuing her master's degree at Yale School of Art on a full fellowship. Jennifer, the quiet poet who barely spoke in classes but whose writing made teachers cry, is now a senior in high school and has already been accepted to Reed College, Oberlin, and Wesleyan with full scholarships. She's also published a collection of poems about growing up as a quiet kid in a loud world, and the book has become required reading in several college education courses. Each of these students stays in touch with Maya, and together, they've created an informal mentoring network for other students who don't fit traditional academic molds. They call themselves the Different Ones, and they've helped dozens of younger students navigate the college application process using portfolio-based approaches. Elena Vasquez, Maya's original mentor, passed away peacefully last year at age 85. But before she died, she completed her memoir about being a Latina engineer at NASA, with Maya's help. The book was published posthumously and has become a bestseller. In the STEM memoir category, Elena left her house to the Millbrook Valley School District, with instructions that it be turned into a mentoring center for students pursuing non-traditional paths. The Elena Vasquez Center for Innovation opened this fall, with Maya cutting the ribbon during her winter break. Mrs. Henderson, the guidance counselor who once told us to manage our expectations, retired last year after 30 years in education. At her retirement party, she gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. "I spent most of my career thinking my job was to help students fit into existing systems," she said. "Maya Chen taught me that my real job was to help change those systems, so they fit the students. I only wish I'd learned that lesson sooner." Mrs. Henderson now volunteers at the Elena Vasquez Center, helping train new counselors on recognizing and nurturing diverse forms of intelligence. As for me, I've made some changes too. I left my position at the hospital last year to become the Director of Family Advocacy for the Alternative Excellence Program. My job is to help other parents navigate the challenges of supporting children who don't fit traditional molds. I travel across the country speaking at conferences, training educators, and working with families who are fighting the same battles we once fought. The work is incredibly rewarding, but what moves me most are the letters I receive from parents who found hope in Maya's story. Last week, I heard from a mother in Mississippi whose son with autism is now attending MIT after his high school initially recommended he focus on life skills classes instead of academics. Another family wrote to tell me their daughter with dyslexia just received a full scholarship to study creative writing at Iowa Writers' Workshop. Every success story reminds me that Maya's journey was never just about Maya. It was about proving That intelligence comes in countless forms, and that our job as parents and educators is to recognize and nurture those forms, not force them into narrow categories. Maya calls me every Sunday night, and our conversations have evolved from worried discussions about homework and grades to excited planning for the nonprofit organization she wants to start after graduation. She's calling it Beyond the Box, a foundation that will provide resources, mentoring, and advocacy for students whose intelligence doesn't fit traditional measures. I want to create a world where no parent ever has to fight as hard as you fought for me, Maya told me during our last conversation, and where no kid ever has to doubt their worth because some adult can't see their potential. That's my daughter, still solving problems that matter, still thinking about others, still proving every day that the adults who wrote her off had no idea what they were talking about. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd listened to those voices telling me to lower my expectations. What if I'd accepted that Maya wasn't college material? What if I'd convinced her to settle for less than she deserved? I don't think about it for long, because the reality is too painful to imagine. Not just for Maya, but for all the students she's helped, all the systems she's changed, all the barriers she's broken down for others. Maya's story continues to unfold, and I know her biggest chapters are still ahead of her. But what gives me the most hope is knowing that her story has already inspired countless other stories. Parents who refuse to give up, students who refuse to accept limitations, educators who refuse to let brilliant minds slip through the cracks. If you followed Maya's journey from that first devastating meeting with the guidance counselor to where she is today, I hope you remember this. Every child has extraordinary potential waiting to be recognized. Sometimes it just takes one person who refuses to stop believing, who fights against systems that don't serve their child, who insists that different doesn't mean less than. Maya proved them all wrong, but more importantly, she proved that being wrong about a child's potential isn't just a mistake. It's a tragedy we can prevent by changing how we see, measure, and nurture the incredible diversity of human intelligence. The fight for our children's potential is never really over. But knowing that Maya and students like her are out there, changing systems from the inside, gives me hope that future generations of different kids won't have to fight as hard as we did. And that might be the most important legacy of all. Next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.